booming in Saudi Arabia? What are remittance earners working on? What's their hope about Bangladesh?
We had record number of people leaving the country, many of them coming to the Middle East, many of them coming to Saudi and so on, but remittances were not coming.
Are we still going to see these low-skilled migrant workers being sent from Bangladesh to all these countries?
Before July 2024 was that a lot of money actually was coming in, but they were coming in through informal channels. Color worker, every dollar I send, if I can get 10 taka more, that's a big deal for me.
Government is pushing for more migrant workers.
But a lot of that outflow was also matched by illegal inflows, hundi.
No infrastructure whatsoever.
To work in a caregiving industry, you need to have certain level of education.
Pension fund. How do we use that? Where do we use that? Build the better image of Bangladesh, to upscale, to build this trust.
This requires a far higher degree of trust.
So what do you think their aspirations are? How do they see Bangladesh? What's their hope about Bangladesh?
This is a country that is going through massive transformation.
Good morning, everyone. So I'm Rubaiyath Sarwar, Managing Director at Innovation Consulting, and today I'm signing on from Delhi, India. And of course, I have Jyoti Rahman with me. Today is J&J Fireside, and Jyoti Rahman is now sitting in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia. As those of you who follow me, we catch up over our travels in different parts of the world, and we talk about what we're observing around us, and we try to connect it to global issues and then bring it back to home in Bangladesh. But most of all, what we talk about also has a global implication, especially an implication for global South to South, and we're trying to build a podcast that caters to the global South to South conference needs. How are you, Jyoti Rahman?
Yes, I'm well. Thank you, Rubaiyath, also Jyoti. And then, yes, welcome to our third show. So we plan to do this more systematically. We plan to put this in YouTube eventually, but for now, this is the third conversation and exciting.
So, Jyoti Rahman, we were talking just before we were starting the show. So you are in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia. I have a few questions for you. The first one we have been discussing for a long while. It's about, let's say, the remittance earners in Bangladesh. So how do you see it? Is it booming in Saudi Arabia? What are remittance earners working on? I understand that you have probably spoken with some of them. So what do you think their aspirations are? How do they see Bangladesh? What's their hope about Bangladesh? Briefly touch us on that.
Okay, all right. So firstly, this is my third visit since July, and I visited once before that, so fourth visit altogether. A lot of Bangladeshis are not actually in Riyadh. A lot of them are in Jeddah or Dammam, right? But Riyadh also has a very sizable contingent. So, for example, the hotel I'm in, a lot of the support staff are Bangladeshi. And the hotel I stayed in previously also had that. At my workplace in the Ministry of Finance, a lot of the support staff there, security people, cleaners, and so on, they are also Bangladeshi. So there's quite a sizable community I see around. And in the weekend, so this is Sunday here, so beginning of the work week. On Thursday, I actually ventured out to a neighborhood that seemed Bangladeshi. So I Googled up, looked for Bangladeshi restaurants and cafes, and then ventured out. A lot of the workers are so in terms of direct remittance flows. Okay, we have seen since the change in regime that remittances have picked up, formal remittances have picked up in Bangladesh. Okay, so we used to get $2 billion a month, not just from Saudi, but from everywhere. Now, $3 billion is new normal. So one big thing that has happened since July is that a lot of this money is now coming in formally. Okay, so they are coming in through the formal channels, and therefore they are adding to the balance of payments, contributing to balance of payments. For a few years before July, that was not the case. So the puzzle then was that, okay, why isn't remittance coming in? Given that we know that since COVID, since the pandemic had ended, since the lockdowns had ended for a number of years. So the story was, at that time, before July 2024, was that a lot of money actually was coming in, but they were coming in through informal channels. So what was happening was that on the one hand, there were taka outflow that now we know from sort of the plundered banks and siphoning and all of that. But a lot of that outflow was also matched by illegal inflows, hundi. Okay, whereas now the outflow has stopped, illegal outflow has stopped, and money is coming through formal channels. So that's one side. The other side is that back then, people expected taka to depreciate. Okay, so from 2022, 2023, when the dollar was appreciating, in 2022, 2023, across the world, US dollar was appreciating. And so other currencies were depreciating. And taka was also depreciating, except in case of taka, because of the lack of confidence on the Bangladesh Bank and the authorities, the expectation was that the depreciation would continue. And when you have that kind of expectation, then the informal market always looks better. Okay, so if you think that taka today is 120 and tomorrow it's going to be 130, then there will be some player in the market. There will be arbitrage opportunity, and sort of price 130 in the informal market, right? And if I'm sending, I'm a blue collar worker. Every dollar I send, if I can get 10 taka more, why do I? That's a big deal for me, right? So that also encouraged informal market. Now the situation is very different. Now the globally, US dollar is actually depreciating since Trump got elected because of tariff issues and other issues around the US. Globally, dollar has been depreciating. Okay, so that's one side of the thing. The other thing is that Bangladesh Bank has a lot more credibility now. So taka has been stable, if not slightly appreciating. So right now, the informal market does not really have any attraction for any reasons. There is not really any taka outflow and or dollar outflow from Bangladesh, and there isn't any depreciation pressure in the global markets or on money market, foreign exchange market. So people are using the formal channels. A lot of the people here, as far as I could tell in this visit and also previously, people who come to Saudi for work, usually their families are back in Bangladesh. So these are not just men, mostly men, but not just men. Now, I didn't obviously get a chance to talk to many of the women who come to work in Bangladesh because they work at home or as sort of home workers or caregivers and so on. But men or women, they tend to be single. There are very few families that migrate that come to Saudi Arabia for work. Okay, most of the families are left back in Bangladesh. Typically, what happens is you get your day, you get your wage, you are provided accommodation, and in most cases, you are also given food. Okay, so mostly the money that you get, you save. And you save, and then you remit it back to Dhaka.
I want to park you on that. Two critical issues. I have spoken with many remittance workers on my flights, and this is something very, very important point to note. Even in Rome, I was talking to a flower shop operator from Bangladesh, and he was giving me the full maths of how much he earns. If I'm not wrong, it was 2016. I think he was saying that he earns around in Bangladesh taka 82,000 or something. And what he was telling me was like 60,000 or so is saved and sent back home. So, they barely use money. They
That's right.
barely use money, they barely spend. And that always surprised me. I mean, these people, they work hard and save so much just to send back. No consumerism at all.
No, that's absolutely right. If anything, people who work in Europe, in Rome or other European cities, they probably save slightly more than, so in the Middle East, the savings is, they spend slightly more. If anything, in the Middle East, consumption is even, I mean, the spending is even less, savings proportionately is higher.
And there's also one other reason for that is because many of them who migrate, they have a loan of around, if it is, let's say, Malaysia, it would be around 3 lakhs to 4 lakhs. But if it is going to all the way to Europe, can go up to as much as 10 lakhs. And
That's
they
right.
have to pay back that money. And I've
That's
done
right.
a calculation. It takes around, depending on the status, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. So the first years of incomes are basically gone to pay back that amount. And then the next cycle of income are paid to basically build assets at home, which are like buying a land or building a house. And it's the next 5 years where they can start to think about, let's say, probably spending something. This is a crazy tough.
This is a tough life, absolutely. So if you emigrate, say at your, say, let's say you're 20 and you have moved somewhere, whether it's in Saudi Arabia or in the Middle East, elsewhere in the Middle East or in Europe, then you're looking at, yes, so sort of your 20s would be spent on paying down your loans or paying off your loans that you had taken to come here, and also probably support your brother or cousin and so on also to move. And then only in your 30s and your 40s you would start to think that, okay, what do I do with for myself, or do I get married and all of those things. The other thing here, a slight difference between the Middle East and Europe, is that Europe still has technically a hope of naturalization for most people. Okay, so sort of you could, even if you go there illegally and claim asylum and so on, maybe there is a pathway, okay? Albeit that pathway seems to be narrowing very fast. So, for example, in the UK, they are bringing in new rules which says that if you come in as an asylum seeker, then the path to naturalization is 25 years, right? In the Middle East, there is no path to naturalization. You could stay in Saudi Arabia for 50 years, and you would not be a Saudi citizen. Right. And then same with UAE or Kuwait and so on. Right. So that is a very different dynamics. Right. You know that you are never going to be a natural here. So there is no point accumulating your savings here. You send it back to Bangladesh. You are muted, I think. You're muted, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. So a few points to connect from this and to move on to the next discussion. So we understand why there is more money sent in informal channel. I remember we were debating in our circle before the regime fell that taka would go as much as 200 against dollar.
Yes.
And then there was a revised speculation of 150. We actually have to, after today's call, go back to him and tell him to pay us money for failing so heavily on that. But anyways, taka has stabilized more or less at 120 level. Here in India, I'm getting an exchange rate of 88. They also depreciated, but not so heavily. We're still having a 27% gap between Bangladesh taka and Indian rupee. It was much less before. Understand that one. Now, my question is, let's say you have seen in recent times that the government is pushing for more migrant workers. And I think the future elected government is also going to take that route. There is a little bit of change. We are talking about language skills training. We're talking about German, Japanese, Chinese language training. There's already advanced discussion going on about sending workers to Japan. All good. My question is, okay. So another point that I want to add here. We were just discussing about, let's say, some of these new age politicians, the Gen Z politicians who have come up after July revolution. They're in their late 20s. If they have a 50 years career in politics, I hope and I believe and I pray, they are going to see a world that goes till 2075, say, for instance, from now on. Are we still going to see these low skilled migrant workers being sent from Bangladesh to all these countries? Are we going to shift?
Very good question. And of course, 50-year time horizon is, difficult to answer. As it happens, I am actually in Riyadh, without getting into the details, part of it is about longer term challenges and longer term transition in Saudi Arabia. So Saudi Arabia, as you know, is going through, this is a country that is going through massive transformation. Okay. They realize here that the age of oil is over. Not just in here in Saudi Arabia, but also if you look around in other Gulf countries, UAE and Qatar and so on, that there is a realization, there is an appreciation that the age of oil, the age of prosperity that these countries had by digging the black liquid out of earth and then just pipe it or ship it overseas and get money. That age is going to be ending soon. So they get that. There are all these, mega projects, Kaiga projects that they call it here, right? Mega projects is what we have in countries like Bangladesh. Here, these are called Kaiga projects, right? So there is a lot of construction going on. A lot of things are being built. Okay, so there is demand for workers here in Saudi Arabia, but also in other Gulf countries. And as long as we have young men who are going to go and do construction work, building stuff, right, we will be sending them. So that's one side of it. However, there is the other thing, and this is probably where there has been a shift in mentality in Bangladesh, in the government circles. So definitely in the interim government, but also political parties are talking about it and there are views, which is that we can't just send young, relatively unskilled men overseas. We need to also think about other markets for our workers. So Europe, Japan, Korea, these countries are facing demographic crunch. Right, so there's the population are aging rapidly there, and which brings with it need for caregivers. Okay, so a big market in these countries are going to be in the caregiving industry. I'm not talking necessarily about doctors. Doctors will be part of it, but also nurses and even support staff. Right. In those kind of sectors where human interface and interactions are very important. There is a gender element to this. So this is not just young men who can go and be, work in the construction sites. There's a huge opportunity for women here as well. There is also a skill element to this. In fact, you would need to have a bit more. To be a construction worker, all you need is basically your bare hands and muscles. Okay, to work in a caregiving industry, you need to have certain level of education. As it happens in Bangladesh, we also have seen in the last 15, 20 years a surplus of nominally educated workforce. Okay, people who are getting university graduate degrees without necessarily being competitive in corporate jobs. okay, because of poor quality of those education, those universities and so on, right? So these workers, these people, individuals, they can, with a bit of training, with a bit of language training, with a bit of cultural appropriateness, training, with a bit of training in the caregiving sector, they can be employed where the demands are in the countries of global north.
It would take 10 years of planning, mind you, because you
Absolutely.
start, let's say, from now on, 2 years for building the relationships, infrastructure, etc. You then send a first tranche, you make mistakes, you understand about the demand, and then you move. And then so the milking would come actually between year 7 to year 10. So it would require 10 years planning for sure. That's A. My biggest concern is that I have never seen in my career of 21 years, there are governments who connect to each other and build on each other's strategies. And we get a disconnection between the strategies. And that's where things fall apart. So this is something that requires a long-term transitional strategy. Now, I'll quickly give you two examples that are happening outside the government's interventions, I would say, or if they have, I don't know. I was in Malaysia 2 times this year, and I saw a lot of guards, security guards in the big buildings are from Bangladesh. I was not thinking they're from Bangladesh. I thought maybe they're from India. And very well built, tall, doesn't look like Bangladeshi, not stunted, not wasted, very light. I mean, that's also one of my challenges, that we are not having stunted men anymore. Children are not stunted, and therefore men are not stunted. So that's an upgrade to see Bangladeshi security workforces. But let's say gradual upgrades. If you are in Dubai airport, all are Filipino and Thai salespersons, right? They're also sending people. Filipino also sends helping hands. Indonesia is not much on sales. They also send helping hands. But all the countries are trying to move up on the value chain, on the ladder. So my question, therefore, was how we move up. You have chalked out very many systems, caregiving. It has come up very big. I was recently with a mission in Dhaka, and they were saying how big it would be for their country. So, but we have no infrastructure whatsoever to support building of a caregiving economy, or let's say build the skills for that. We do have doctors and nurses. For nurses, bear in mind that back in 2006, we had to intervene to have BSc nursing degree in the private sector, and we were eventually successful in 2009. But then it was a discussion back then, 2006, we were talking about Kerala nurses being replaced by Bangladeshi nurses. Go back to Evercare Hospital now, it's still Kerala nurses.
Right.
So what aches me is that we talk about the same thing even after 2 decades. When will that end, Jyoti?
So, of course, we had, of those 2 decades, at least one was lost because of the fallen regime. But we cannot make that excuse, we cannot continue with that excuse for much longer. I will add to this, which is that when, in places like construction industry, it is, you can sustain this. You can sustain that kind of labor export without much government support. Why? Because people who are working in the sort of the quality issue is much less intense or much less risky than caregiving. Think about it from a very micro perspective. Okay, when you're bringing a caregiver into your home. So, you are an Italian family and you want your mother to be looked after by somebody. This requires a far higher degree of trust than, if you are a construction magnate in the desert of Saudi Arabia, and you are bringing in, whole bunch of young guys to build. Okay, you don't really care about the quality of these individuals, right? Whereas in the caregiving industry, that kind of because the job is human centric, the human interface is crucial. So without developing that and developing that trust, we're not going to be competitive against countries like Philippines, who have a much longer head start than we do. Places like Philippines, places like Kerala, they are way ahead of us in the curve.
And to connect this talk, a bit of informal but important talk, we just had Miss Universe, Miss Filipino, even though she became, I guess, fourth runners up, but she made headlines all over the world. And she was heavily promoted. And later I learned how much Philippines invested in grooming her, in training her. Now, the reasons why these are important to note is that these are all part of soft power.
That's right.
When Philippines is being talked about, when Philippines is being seen in a pageantry, when a Filipino woman is representing her country with pride, that sends a signal, a positive signal. In Bangladesh, we somehow see all of these as disconnected silos. A Miss Universe pageantry is a Miss Universe pageantry. It doesn't have anything to do with economics, but it does.
It does.
Let's say when I'm talking about, let's say, trade, I have recently also been saying that we also need to bring cultural exchange. Now, why is that? That's soft power, and we spoke about it in our last talk, right? You remember. So what we are saying here, to build the better image of Bangladesh, to upscale, to build this trust, this kind of soft interventions would be essential. If Bangladesh
Absolutely.
is not seen in that space, if Bangladesh is seen as a mind my language, as a sweeper class, we would never be able to graduate. And that upgradation requires everything from fashion to talk to discussion to how you connect, how you say your story. And I'll connect it to what I'm seeing here in Delhi in a very, let's say, wrong way, though. At the end of this show, but these are important things that we fail to connect. What would be your suggestion to the next elected government in that regard?
Not just to the next elected government, but also you talked about young politicians, people who led the July uprising from the front, and some of them have ended up in the government, in the interim government. They're forming their own political parties and so on. So to all of them, I think that soft power message that look, we need to start thinking of Bangladesh as beyond just, beyond unskilled labor. Okay, we need to think about some other narrative that can be connected. Let me note two things, positive examples. Okay. Mahfouz Alam, the information advisor in the current government, he talks about Bengal Delta civilization, civilizational state, confluence of culture and all of those things. So part of me is very excited about that. Part of me thinks that, okay, this is all very interesting in abstract, but what does this mean in practice? So, as you know, I'm a big pop culture aficionado. Okay, so a big part of India's soft power traditionally had been Bollywood. Okay. Now, Bollywood itself has been losing a lot of its shine in the last decade, particularly because of India's far right turn to, ethno-nationalistic, communalistic politics. Okay. But traditionally, historically, Bollywood had been huge, not just among Indian diaspora, but among, all Middle Eastern countries, in Africa, in Central Asia, former Soviet Union, right? people like going back to the 50s, people like Raj Kapoor and Dilip Kumar, they were big stars in these countries. Okay. Um, Pakistan has actually made a lot of advancement in their TV soap operas that are now actually seen in many of these countries. And again, not just among diaspora, not just among, we're not talking about, Pakistani workers who, go from their construction field, go back to their mess or their apartment and watch this. These are actually watched by, Africans and Arabs and so on, right? Turkey has huge, soft power. Korea, K-pop is big. There is actually no particular reason why we, because these are things that require creativity. These are not capital intensive. Okay, we're not talking about the kind of Bollywood movies that were big in the 50s. We're not big set piece spectacles, that required millions of dollars. Back then, Bollywood didn't have millions of dollars, right? So these are things we should be able to do if we have the creative vision. So that's one thing. Yeah. Let me just quickly note the other thing that has happened in last week or so. Okay. So last week, Bangladesh won against India in a football match. Okay. Now, Bangladesh is probably in the bottom 10 countries in the global football ranking. And India is better than Bangladesh, but not that much better. These countries are not big football countries. Okay. One interesting thing about the current Bangladesh team is that half of the team is made of children of Bangladeshi diaspora. Okay, so there's this guy called Hamza Chowdhury, whose father is from the Caribbeans. His mother is from Bangladesh. He grew up in England. He was born in England, grew up in England, played football in England for English clubs, and then has now made the switch to Bangladesh national team. There is a kid from the US, similar story, that born in the US with Bangladeshi parents, and now he's playing for the national team. So this is also that kind of global connection, right? Global connection of diaspora bringing things back. And this is in its own way, this is also creating a soft power story, that Bangladesh is not just cheap, unskilled labor. It's not just garments and construction workers in the Middle East. There is actually something more. There are reasons to be hopeful. There are opportunities. That would be my message. That start investing in these things.
So actually, the Ministry of Culture is indeed part of our trade ambition. And I have a sense that probably they understand it. I've recently met with a few of them within the Ministry of Cultural Affairs. They have hired a few people who probably understands the issue of soft power. So let's be hopeful of that. But the point that we're both concluding here is that in the future economic growth strategy of Bangladesh, we want trade, culture, investment, finance, branding of Bangladesh, these all come together to provide an equivocal message. And that message sustains for next 4 or 5 decades. It has to be consistent, right? That's what we're concluding here.
That is what we're concluding here. And Bangladesh's story has to be that, that we had talked about before, that it can be a role model for the global South. So that should be the South-South cooperation, peer learning from other countries of the South. Those are the kind of stories that we should be able to tell that others may not be.
Definitely. Now, let's say, as you know, I have been talking to you about Bangladesh being a global South-to-South development cooperation lead, and given the global changes in development cooperation, by bridging development and economic cooperation, we can take a big leap and lead on this. And I want the next government to really, really invest to make Bangladesh the epicenter of global South to South cooperation and be in a leadership position. But when I say that, I always also want to remind people that in negotiation, in global tactics, there are two issues. You engage on one hand, you keep people busy, and on the other hand, you strategize about a future that people are not thinking about. It's as simple as that. That's a ground rule that works in business. That's a ground rule that works in building a country. So how you're using your both hands. The two hands are not shaking with the same person. So this is how diplomacy works. And I have recently been talking to all the policymakers, politicians. I'm hopeful, but yet I'm a little bit, I would say, concerned that I probably don't see the, let's say, seasoned understanding of how to act with both hands in global operations to make global connections and deals. And this is going to be important. Having said that, I'm now going to bring the closer to this discussion. So I landed in Kolkata, spent a night, came to Pune for my wife's exam. I was locked inside the hotel and was mostly working from the hotel. The hotel looked like straight out of North Korea. It had a restaurant called Gung. I saw a lot of Koreans in the hotel as well. It's a very old hotel. It also looked Russian because Russia and North Korea, you know, is the same very big facilities. I don't know why, kind of a facility, a red brick also. And then it was very old and they're renovating on one side, noises and etc. But anyways, I didn't see much of Maharashtra this time. I went back to Pune after 21 years, I think. So, but a lot of high rises and etc. That's what I saw as a change immediate. And then I came to Delhi last night, middle of the night, and signed into this hotel. I'm a top tier in Booking.com. So the fact that I'm fooled by Booking.com here is surprising. So what I saw in Booking.com was a hotel offering a mega discount for my Genius 3-tier level. And it looked polished, it looked new furniture, modern, Scandinavian, and also it's brasses. So I thought my wife would be liking it. I showed her the pictures and we booked it. And last night when we arrived, I was like,
Right.
What? So anyways, and then I started to investigate as I do. So the hotel symbol, the toiletry boxes, the tissue boxes, the way where I'm sitting, if I picture each of these separately, I do get the image that was shown in Booking.com. But when I see it collectively, it's a chaos and it's nothing
Right.
that I would stay at this age of my life. I need to work. So because I need to work, I need some kind of facilities so that I constantly work on the move. And then I tried to figure what's happening. And I tried to connect all the dots. Now, this is what I see here. The recent startup advent, India is very, very, let's say, grown if we compare to Bangladesh, very advanced. And so what I see here are selective glitters. If you promote that selective glitters, you definitely be attracted to bees like us. But underneath the shell, there's nothing. And it's all about perspective. The perspective that you are taking from where I'm a photographer, so I know exactly the kind of shots, and next time I won't be fooled. So they took the photos exactly from that angle. Those are all present here. And So having said that, so it's a new kind of a scam that is coming up, and even booking.com has been pulled. I'll definitely inform them. But point is, in Indian airports, lately I'm seeing all these new retail shops. They all have something like cart. They have a Coco Mart. So they have this fascination about it. These are chocolate businesses, these are leather businesses, these are gift businesses. They're coming up with innovative products and all sorts. So in Bangladesh, there's always these idea that startups are only tech. But here in India, in my last few visits, I'm definitely seeing that even the hotels, they were transformed by Oyo, I think. Yeah, Oyo Hotels, a guy who was in his 21 and became a billionaire. So let's forget about the scam, but what definitely needs to be learned is, let's say, how the people's money, the private investors' money, are shaping up Indian economy bottom up and everywhere. So I think that's something that I'm seeing here everywhere. And that's also something that the new government in Bangladesh would have to think of, because capital is scarce, and capital would have to come from a lot of the big conglomerates who are holding the capital in Bangladesh. And they have to have this vision. They are traveling everywhere. They should see these and think about how to bring this to Bangladesh. The shine and brine of Bangladesh would definitely improve.
That's very interesting, and it would not just be. So the other thing to add to that is that, remember the conversation we had just before, when we started, about all the remittance workers sending their money back home, right? There is also that pool of money that should be funneled into investment, productive investment. Right. So, sort of, if you send that money and then, that money goes into buying land in villages and just pushing up the land price, or, sort of just basically, for the lack of any other opportunity, you put it into pyramid schemes and so on. And then that money then gets, sort of funneled up, gets into banks, and banks siphon off. That's basically what had been happening to us for the last decade, right? Hopefully, we are not going to see a return of that. Hopefully, we are going to see after July, after the election, hopefully over the next decade, we'll see a better investment climate in Bangladesh, so that this money that's actually, is collectively, we're talking actually fairly substantial amount of money. Each individual may send, only a few lakh taka and so on. But keep in mind that we have millions of Bangladeshis overseas. Those individuals, each individual sending a few lakh taka adds up to a lot of money.
Indeed.
So,
indeed.
So there is a pool of fund that can be channeled, that should be channeled into proper investment, into things like startups that are not just in tech, but startups that are actually catering to domestic services in Bangladesh.
And also connecting to the migrant workers issues, there can be so many different types of startups can come up. And finally, as you raised the point about the remittance service money and where does it go? It goes into building a Victorian style building that is unproductive and it's just sitting in the middle of Hobbygonch, right?
Right.
Okay, so that's aspiration. But on that note, we'll conclude with one other point where maybe we will think about bringing one guest as well, pension fund. How do we use that? Where do we use that? I have recently seen in ASEAN how they're using pension fund for big investment across the continent. Bangladesh is nowhere on that. Are you there?